Welcome to episode 142 of the No More Wasted Days podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and today we're going to be talking all about hangovers. I hate hangovers. Hangovers were the worst part of my drinking. Blackouts were probably second, and they were a driving force behind me staying sober for so long because I loved a hangover-free life. I still love a hangover-free life, but these days my hangovers feel farther away. But today I'm going to talk about my worst hangover, the one that I think of when I consider drinking again. I think about this one hangover and I am so quickly thrown back into my drinking days and how terribly uncomfortable it was for me. And it is always enough for me to be like, I don't want that. I don't need that. And I know my drinking will get there again, so I'm not going back. And then I'm also going to talk to you about my evolution of hangovers, because hangovers weren't always the worst thing for me. I think some of it is age, but some of it is, my drinking became more and more and more. So my hangovers got worse and worse and worse. And then I'm going to talk about why we actually get hangovers. Why is this something that happens? I'm going to go into the science of it, because if you're anything like me, when you know more facts about something, it is easier to say no. And when I know exactly what alcohol is doing to my body, I'm like, I don't need this. Before we dive all the way into today's episode, though, I want you to know that I have a special quiz for you. It's called your Path to Power Quiz, and it is going to help you figure out exactly what tools and strategies work for you where you are in your alcohol-free journey. The quiz takes about 2 minutes to complete, and once you're done, you're going to get a personalized playlist of No More Wasted Days podcast episodes that are going to guide you specifically on your alcohol-free journey. This resource is totally free, and people love it because they get immediate tools to put into place that work for them specifically on their journey, and it's fun. If you're anything like me, you used to love filling out quizzes in the back of YM and Teen magazine. This is similar to that, but a little bit more serious topic, and you're actually going to get some tools and strategies at the end of it. So hop in the link in the show notes of this episode to take your Path to Power quiz today if you haven't already. Now let's get back to the episode. So like I was saying, I'm going to start this episode with my most vivid hangover. This is the one that flings me back into reality when I'm considering drinking again. I don't consider drinking very often, you guys, and even when I do, it's really a flash, but I used this strategy so much in my early days. Like, I'm going to remember a hangover, and this is going to help me remember why I'm not doing this. So we were on vacation in Punta Cana. It was an all-expense paid trip by Beachbody. I had earned it for my husband and I. It was our first time being to an all-inclusive resort, and we were blown away. If you've never been to an all-inclusive resort, it is literally you can eat and drink anything you see within the resort. And this includes alcohol. So not only was I so excited about the food, because I love food, I love eating, but I was so excited about the alcohol piece. Like, you had alcohol in your room and you could drink it. It wasn't going to be an extra charge. When you went out to dinner, you could have alcohol. It wasn't an extra charge. When you're out at a club, you could have anything to drink, even shots. So my husband and I are having a pretty fun first day on this trip, and we're drinking throughout the day, lots of day drinking by the beach, and we go to the pool and we actually connect with some other people, 2 other couples, and they happen to be from Alaska, we're from Oregon, and we really jive, because I will say one thing. I don't want to talk badly about Beachbody ever, because it was a really cool part in my life, but I never felt like I was quite one of the typical Beachbody women. So when I met these people, like, they loved the outdoors and they seemed down to earth. They seemed more on my level. And guess what? They loved to drink. So we were all instant buddies, and they were our people. So that evening, we all got ourselves ready in our own rooms and we headed out to dinner together. We ate dinner, we drank, we had a great time, and then we decided, let's go to the club. Well, I still see pictures from this club moment, and I don't quite remember it. Some of that is actually because it's been a while since this has happened, but some of it's because there was definitely so much drinking going on. First, we started at one club, like a rooftop deal with a band playing. So we were dancing to that. And then that finished, that closed down. And we were like, let's move on to the next thing. Well, there was another club that would stay open late. So we went there. And that is really when the night got really hazy for me. We were dancing, having a great time, and there were lots and lots of shots. And I like to try to blame it on that whole idea that sometimes there's bad alcohol in other countries, but I don't think that's what it is. When I really think about it, I drank so much. But I definitely tried to tell that story when I got home about this hangover. Like, God, I kind of think I got some of that really bad alcohol that people talk about. No, I just drank way too much and did so many shots. So the next morning, I wake up. I don't really remember how I got back to my room. I feel like I'm going to die. Like, it is the worst hangover. I can barely get myself to the bathroom. When I finally do, I just lay on the cold bathroom floor. And that's where I am. And my husband was trying to help me. I don't think he had ever seen me have a hangover this bad. And I remember telling him, like, I think I need to go to the hospital. And, I like to look back at my drinking days and really I was a fun-loving drinker. I really was. I always had a good time when I was drinking. But my hangovers were the worst. And my husband really took the brunt of that. He really helped me. And granted, he was drinking too. He had hangovers too, never on the level I had. So I was just feeling so terrible. My husband got me Gatorade. He made me try to eat some stuff. I just couldn't. And finally, my husband was like, do you mind if I go down to the pool and just lay around and read? And I was like, no, please go enjoy yourself. And I literally was just laying in bed all morning, going from the bed to going to the bathroom to try and puke, and just doing that on rotation. And it was just terrible. And finally, my husband came back to check on me. I say finally, like he was gone a long time. Then my husband came back to check on me, and he was like, you know what you need to do? You need a drink. And I was like, yeah, I've already thought that. So I did what any good drinker would do. I started day drinking. I had probably made it till noon or 1 of just laying around in the hotel room. And then I just sipped on vodka and cranberry juice, something like that. I made stuff from whatever they had in their all-inclusive fridge. And then I finally did start to feel better, because that is a way to cure your hangover, but it's not a good way, guys. Don't, if you started listening to this episode and you were like, I hope I get some tips on curing a hangover, you're in the wrong place. The best way to cure a hangover is to not drink, but I definitely was a hair of the dog drinker at the end of my drinking days. For probably the last 2 to 3 years of my drinking, that was a go-to. So I started drinking again, and I did start to feel better. I never started feeling 100% again that day. We did go out to dinner, and that was so hard. And then I got myself to bed earlier that night, and then the next day I was ready to go again. But it was just one of the worst hangovers. It made me feel terrible. It made me think I'm on this vacation, this beautiful vacation with my husband, and I'm wasting it. I am wasting a whole day. I'm not able to hang out with him, and I'm not able to go do all the things that were happening. And it was just miserable. And I felt terrible about myself. I kept thinking, what would I tell my parents, like, about this day on my vacation? Like, what did you do on vacation? Well, I recovered from a hangover one of the days. So that was just a terrible one. It's definitely a standout one. It makes me think to myself, you can go back to drinking, but one thing I know about myself is I will go back to heavy drinking. I'm not a person who moderates. Maybe I would early on, but it would get back to that at some point. And that hangover was so scary and so terrible that I never want to repeat it again. Now, granted, I kept drinking for, I think, a year after that, or 2 years of that. That was not like my stopping point. I think it was 2 years after that. But it is something that I kind of use as my thing to snap me back to reality. Now, let's talk about my evolution of hangovers, because it wasn't like I was always drinking so much that I was super hungover every single weekend thinking I might need to go to the hospital. That really wasn't my truth, okay? It was at some points. It was in Punta Cana. And at the end, my hangovers were very consistent and happening a lot. But in college, I was a binge drinker. I was not an everyday drinker. I was somebody who would go out on the weekends and I would drink too much. I would wake up feeling kind of yucky. Like, I don't remember feeling so terrible when I was hungover, but I was usually able to go to McDonald's and get a value meal because I would still sleep in. I don't know what it is about college, but you can sleep till noon. I can't do that anymore. And yeah, I would go get, a value meal at McDonald's, come home and just chill for the day. I do remember at that period, my parents would call sometimes when I would have a hangover and I wouldn't answer. I would check caller ID and I would see it was them and I would just be like, oh my God, I don't want to answer. I feel so miserable. I'm not going to talk to them. And I feel like that was the first time where alcohol was really isolating me from people in my family. It didn't happen a lot. It didn't happen every weekend. I might have had a mild hangover. I might have drank every weekend, but I didn't avoid my parents' phone calls every weekend, but I do remember doing it at times. And that's kind of that first isolation piece for me. And I do remember starting to compare myself to other people, wondering if everybody was feeling this awful that day, because it was the 90s, you guys. It was the early 90s. So it's not like I was texting people to see how they were feeling. It was kind of like I might talk to my really close friends the next day, and that was about it. But I would definitely isolate, cure myself from my hangover. In my 20s and 30s, I was a teacher, and I started drinking more, started going to bars more because, I was finally like well into my 20s and could go. And I would sometimes plan my hangovers. When I knew I was going to have a musical, I would plan to have a sub the next day so I could have a hangover because I knew I was going to go out to the bar with my friend and we were going to drink and celebrate that I was done with yet another musical. That is something I held on to for so long. I have a lot of shame around that I did not show up to work the next day to be with my students, to make that connection. Instead, I stayed home and had a hangover. I did have a great sub. I always had the sub lined up, but still, that was one of the things that I loved so much when I quit drinking, or when I didn't choose to do that. I would be like, oh my gosh, it is so much better when I'm at school the next day with my students. But I did meet Ryan. In my late 20s, I met Ryan, and we have always been drinking buddies together. We would drink way too much on the weekends, and it was the same story, blackout, feeling miserable, having to force myself to eat the next day. I was not a person at that point who had mimosas or Bloody Marys to make myself feel better, so I would really just lay around, and there were so many times where we would go to his dad's house for dinner, and I would just feel terrible, probably until I'd drink wine then. I always wonder what his dad must have thought then, right? Because, we were pretty open about the fact, we were with these friends, we drank way too much, da-da-da-da. And that just kind of escalated. My drinking became more and more. My hangovers became more and more. And as I got older, I drank more, which means my hangovers got worse. And then I started day drinking to cure my hangovers, realizing that a mimosa would make it go away. But then I had to keep that going. And it was just such a terrible cycle looking back to it. And this is why I came up with the idea for No More Wasted Days. I had so many wasted days because of hangovers. It wasn't rest. I would tell myself it was rest. I'd be like, oh, you're just resting. You have a hard job. You're a teacher. Like, you take a load off, you drink too much, and then you recover. Like, it's just part of life. It's okay. But now I actually rest and recover on my weekends from life in such a better way. I go into Monday feeling so much more well-rested, and I don't deal with that anxiety anymore. And that's something I wanted to talk about. I was always somebody who had the mental hangover. Yes, I would feel miserable. I would have a headache. I would have a stomach ache, all of that stuff, right? I would feel like my skin was tight and I hated like touching my skin hurt. But I also always had this emotional layer to my hangovers. I would feel anxiety. I would feel my heart pounding in my chest. And I would want to text people because I wanted to check in and see if I had done anything embarrassing. I never said like, what did I say? Was it super embarrassing? It was more like, hey, last night was crazy, huh? Like I was always trying to play it off like, was it okay? Are we good? Did I say anything terrible? So there was always that piece, just the anxiety and feeling miserable. And then there was the shame that went along with my hangovers. And the more research I've done in this is a very normal thing for people to feel like this in their hangovers. It's actually a part of it. But for me, the shame, it wasn't always about the drinking. It was about who I was becoming and who I could see myself becoming. And I would go on social media. I would scroll social media and see these people doing amazing things with their weekends, right? And who knows? Those people might have had a hangover too. Like they just were sharing the highlight reel. We don't know. But I would watch people and I'd be like, they're doing so many things with their weekends and I'm just laying here drinking. I'm so miserable. I'm such a terrible person. I really put myself through that. God, I do not miss that anymore. I do not miss that at all anymore. That was one of the worst parts of hangovers, that shame feeling that I would have and that comparison game. And lastly, I talked about this a little bit, but there was that isolation piece. I just wanted to hide in my home. I just wanted to avoid people when I had a hangover. I didn't want to see family. I didn't want to see my friends. I just wanted to be alone until I could feel better. And that isolation piece, I feel like was one of the first things for me. It would happen with a hangover. And then it started to happen more with my drinking. It started to be like, I wanted to isolate so I could drink and drink the amount that I wanted to. So it just all goes in there. But this is the perfect segue into the science piece of all this. What is actually happening in a hangover? Why do we feel miserable after we drink? Okay. And I do have sources for all this. I'll be sure to link them in the show notes. So if you want to go check out more research, you can go check it out, see and find out more. Because if you're a person like me, you can't get enough. But I'm actually going to talk about 6 different ways that alcohol affects us through a hangover, why that hangover is happening in a physical way in our body. Number 1 is dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. Alcohol is a diuretic, which means it makes your kidneys excrete more water. And this causes dehydration and the loss of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. This is why we wake up the next day and we feel like we have cotton mouth, like our mouth is a desert. This is also why a hangover comes with headaches and dizziness and thirst and muscle weakness. We have just taken all of the water out of our body, and our body needs so much water to survive and feel good, right? And then you're busy drinking alcohol, taking all of that out. This is also why a lot of people will be like, oh, if you just do a spacer between every drink of a glass of water, you won't have a hangover the next day. I heard all the things when I was a drinker, like I'm going to have one drink, then I'm going to have a glass of water and have one drink and have a glass of water. Now, I don't know about you. Those never worked. Like what finally worked was quitting drinking. And I cannot repeat this enough. This is not a hangover prevention episode. This is why we have hangovers, and the best way to prevent them is to not drink. The second reason we experience hangovers is because acetaldehyde toxicity. When your body breaks down alcohol, it turns it into acetaldehyde. It is a toxic compound that actually is more harmful than the alcohol itself. Now, this is the information that sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, you're just trying to fearmonger, but this is the information that helped me feel so much more powerful on my alcohol-free journey and made me go, I don't want this in my life anymore. I don't want to drink alcohol only to have it turn into a more harmful substance in my body the next day. So normally your liver breaks down acetaldehyde quickly, but when you drink too much, it builds up. This toxin causes inflammation, nausea, sweating, and that flushed feeling. I don't know about you. I would feel that like I could feel that my skin was clammy all over. Now, I grabbed this information from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and I will link that in the show notes, like I said, because this is something where people will go, now what? Well, tell me more about this. But here is a simplified breakdown. First, you drink ethanol. It's what's in your drink. It's what is in alcohol. Ethanol is then processed by the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH. Then comes in acetaldehyde. This is processed by another enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase. And then this turns into acetate, which is a harmless substance in your body, and it can eliminate as carbon dioxide and water. So it's a very confusing process, right? If you're not science-based, but what I need you to know is that ethanol then turns into that acetaldehyde and then into acetate. The problem becomes if you drink faster than your liver can keep up, acetaldehyde builds up in your bloodstream, and that's where the real damage can happen. So that pounding headache and queasy stomach, that's acetaldehyde poisoning. So the third area is inflammation and immune response. Alcohol triggers your immune system to release cytokines, which are inflammatory molecules that make you feel tired, sick, and foggy. This is similar to when you're fighting off a virus. So it's why we can feel just as sick with a hangover as we do when we have a virus or a cold. Studies have shown that this immune reaction is one reason hangovers cause fatigue, headache, and sensitivity to light and sound. Which I don't know if you're like me, but you may be nodding along right now going, oh my gosh, I had all of that when I would drink. So when you say you feel like you have the flu after drinking, you're not exaggerating. You actually kind of do have the flu after you're drinking. And then the fourth way that a hangover affects us is low blood sugar. Alcohol interferes with glucose production in your liver, which causes low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. That's why hangovers can make you feel shaky, weak, irritable, and even anxious. And it's probably why people are always like, eat something when you're hungover, raise those blood sugar levels, right? So people who already have a lower baseline of glycogen levels, especially women or those who drink without eating, feel this even more. And I don't know about you guys, but I actually tried to eat less when I knew I wanted to get drunk. And I was never one of those people that wanted to eat once I was drinking because I didn't want it to ruin the buzz. So it turns out that my thinking, although insane, was actually valid, but not that that's really helpful. But again, this podcast episode is not about how to maintain your buzz or how to prevent hangovers, but I just always find those little correlations interesting. And it's one of the reasons I share. I know when I'm with other people who used to drink or are sober curious and now I don't drink, those correlations are something that we always have in common with each other. But I do want you to know that those cravings for pancakes or carbs after drinking, that's your body trying to get your blood sugar back up, and there is a reason for it. So the fifth thing that happens in our body with a hangover is disrupted sleep and neurotransmitter imbalances. It is true that alcohol helps you fall asleep faster, but it suppresses REM sleep, and this is the most restorative phase of sleep. This is why a lot of times you may get a full night of sleep after you've been drinking, but it's not actually quality sleep. And even though alcohol also helps you fall asleep faster, later in the night, your brain rebounds, leading to restlessness and early waking. This is why when I talk about the 3 a.m. panic wake up in so many TikToks, people will be like, oh my gosh, I have that too. It's a very common thing because it's happening because of alcohol. So on top of that, alcohol messes with your neurotransmitters like GABA, which is the one that calms you, and glutamate, which excites you. When the alcohol wears off, your glutamate spikes, and this leads to agitation, sweating, and anxiety. So even if you were asleep for 8 hours after drinking, your brain didn't rest. This glutamate is the thing that actually wakes you up at 3 a.m. So now you really know why this is happening, and the best way to prevent it is to not drink. And I want you to remember that even when you're asleep for 8 hours after drinking, your brain doesn't really get to rest because of these neurotransmitter imbalances. And that's a lot of the times why we feel so emotionally wrecked the next day. Our brain didn't have that time to recalibrate and to rest. Lastly, we have the emotional fallout, or hangxiety. Hangxiety is not a term that I knew until I quit drinking, but nothing could be better to describe how I felt when I had a hangover. Like I said before, alcohol raises those GABA levels, and it also boosts dopamine in an artificial way. This gives you that initial relaxed and confident feeling. It's the thing that gives you the buzz. But when it leaves your system, both of those things crash, and then cortisol, the stress hormone, spikes. This chemical storm leaves you feeling anxious, restless, and self-critical. So this is exactly why I was always sitting there having all of the shame and the anxiety and the guilt the next day after my drinking. Why I was just rethinking my whole life and watching people on social media and thinking, why do they have it all together and not me? This was all happening because alcohol was artificially boosting my GABA and dopamine levels, and then it was crashing and leaving me with so much cortisol in my system. So if you're having the same feelings, no, you're not crazy. Yes, it is actually happening. And when you have that 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. for me, wake up where your heart's pounding and it's full of dread and it's replaying conversations, That's your body in withdrawal from the fake calm that it created the night before. So you really have to start thinking, is it really worth it for me to get this fake calm feeling? Or should I start thinking about how I can actually create real calm in my life and real relaxation in my life? Yes, a lot of those things are a lot harder to create. They take a little bit of maybe willpower, because sometimes it's things like working out and moving your body. Sometimes it's taking time out of your day to meditate. And sometimes it's doing things that are self-care that take a little more time, like taking a bath and really giving yourself you time. But I want you to ask yourself, how much time did it take you to drink? How much time was alcohol consuming for you? Now you can give yourself that time in things that are going to actually give you real dopamine boosts. And then you're not going to have the crash. And then you're actually going to be feeling more calm and relaxed in your day-to-day life. I really hope that all of this information has helped you so much. Again, I never share this stuff as fear-mongering. I'm sharing it as facts. And all of the articles that I used to research for this article will be linked in the show notes so you can check those out. Because the truth is that my hangovers became proof that alcohol was taking more from me than it was giving. There were other areas, but my hangovers were the thing that I could see the most. And they were the thing that was instantly fixed when I quit drinking. You quit drinking, you quit having hangovers. It is as simple as that. Now, there's other things that I'll talk about, like, if you quit drinking, your anxiety may lower. If you quit drinking, your inflammation will lower. All of those things will happen at different times for people. But if you quit drinking, you're going to quit having hangovers. And it is a beautiful, beautiful thing as you go through your first weekend and you wake up on a Saturday morning and you're not filled with suffering and dread and that anxiety and guilt and shame and all of that. I used to just think that hangovers were the price of the fun I was having, but now I realize that they were actually warning signs that I was ignoring all along. And when I picture my vacation in Punta Cana, instead of seeing all the fun that I had on that trip, because I did have fun, and the way that I was able to get away with my husband and go to this all-inclusive resort and like eat wonderful food and hang out with fun people and lay by the pool, those are not the first things I think about. Instead, I see the version of myself who was suffering on that vacation, not the version of myself that was having fun. And I never want to have alcohol steal another moment from me like it did that day. These days, I get to wake up feeling clear, calm, and grateful. And the only thing I'm nursing is a cup of coffee, never my regrets. So as I leave you for this episode, I want to ask you, what's the hangover that changed everything for you? And the one that made you start questioning your relationship with alcohol? You can actually put it as a comment in Spotify or YouTube if you're listening there. And otherwise, you can always leave it as a review in Apple. And again, I want to invite you to take that Path to Power quiz so you can be set up with your personalized playlist of podcast episodes that will help support you on your alcohol-free journey. And if you're tired of wasting your weekends to hangovers, I would love for you to experience what clear, energized mornings feel like. You can join my Reboot and Refresh 30-day alcohol-free challenge right now. This is a self-led challenge, so it means when you sign up, you can start right away. My next live version of this challenge won't happen until January 1st of 2026. So if you're ready to start your journey now, go ahead and hop into this challenge so you have the support of the daily videos and the daily emails. The link to this challenge will also be in the show notes to this episode. All right, thank you so much for listening. And if you haven't already, be sure to leave a review for this podcast. It's one of the best ways to support this podcast, and it's totally free. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be in your ear in the next episode.